Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the channel. In tonight's talk, I'm speaking to Shanna Carroll from Detroit, Michigan. Welcome, Shanna.
Hi, thank you.
Yeah, tonight's a bit of a different conversation for me and the podcast, but one that I think is important to have. And I'd love to just invite you to share a bit about your journey with losing your daughter to a vaccine. And yeah, please go ahead and feel free to share.
Thank you. So Aubrynn was picked to go on a school trip in the summer of 2022. I had gotten a call. They only picked 2 to 3 kids per state or per county in the state. And this group, they kind of got together to be advocates for their states. They went all over. They went to Ellis Island. They went to Canada. They went to Washington, Philadelphia, Boston. And it was a 2-week trip. And early on, we were hesitant about the COVID vaccine because we just didn't do flu vaccines or any of, the colds. And so we had been safe from COVID. We didn't catch COVID up until that point. And my daughter just really wanted to go on this trip. And I begged her, please don't get the vaccine. In our state, in Michigan, we don't have mandates on vaccines. They left it up to the parents in 2022, which they're trying to now revoke that. So for me, and like for her, I just told her, like, let's just wait till they lift all the mandates in other states. Maybe we can, just get by. And in our state at 17, you're also age of consent. So instead of waiting, she went down to the CVS and she got her vaccines. Her first one was on June 7th, and I was heartbroken. But I mean, she just really wanted to go on this trip, and we weren't hearing too many injuries or deaths. So I kept asking her how she was feeling. She had no symptoms. She felt fine. And then she had her second dose, same CVS. It was the same batch number, and she had it on June 28th. So both within the same month. And then she flew out on July 9th. And I had hugged her and kissed her at the airport early on. And the chaperone had said, like, okay, mom, and I did not feel well about this because my children also, I have 4 kids. They don't really go far from me often or for a long length of time. Not that I don't let them, we're very close. So then she would like message me every day and just talk about her day and everything they did. And then on July 18th, she texted me that she said, Mom, I'm sick. And I kind of made a joke, like, so much for those vaccines, like we had to make arrangements that night to go pick her up in New York, which is about a 12-hour round trip. So me and my husband and my daughter, we packed up and we drove out to New York from Michigan. We got to her about 9 a.m. She walked to my car. We were talking. She slept pretty much all the way home, but she was also on a bus previously, so she was exhausted. We got home. It was my 3-year-old's birthday. So she tried to sing happy birthday with us and just, have his presence. And then she went and lay down for a little bit and came back up, and she was hungry for some soup. So we sat and had some soup. And she said, I don't think I can eat anymore, so I'm going to lay down. And I said, okay, why don't you just lay on the couch? That way you're not walking up and down the stairs throughout the night. So she had laid on the couch. So I got up early the next day. So now this is on the 20th. And she was, sitting on the couch. She was hydrating, drinking some water. And I was getting ready to prepare the house for the birthday party. And she just started looking a little flushed or pale, like she was like her color had dropped. So I said, let's go to urgent care, make sure everything, is okay. I want to see how bad, if you have COVID, and we don't want to have a bunch of people over. So let's see where we're at. So she walked to my car. She got in. The emergency room is about 10 minutes away. By the time we got there, she couldn't walk. She was so weak. And I said, we can't walk. And she said, I don't think so. So I went in, they got a wheelchair and they, wheeled her in, and I had to go park and bring my toddler into the waiting room with us. And we went into triage, and we went into triage before we went to the waiting room. So they had hooked all the monitors up to her. They started blinking red. And the girls, the triage nurses had said, well, let's grab another machine. This one might even have a problem with it, or it might be out, not updated or charged. So they brought another one in. It did the same thing. And they said, I saw 98 over 80. And then they put us out in the waiting room. So we were sitting there for about an hour, and my 3-year-old started to get really rambunctious, bumping into the wheelchair. She was trying to rest. So her dad met me up there, and he sat up there while I came home, sat with my other two. And about 2 hours later, I got bombarded with phone calls. My daughter came running out. You got to answer your phone. So I picked up the phone, and all I heard was my ex telling me she had sat up and said, did they call me back yet? And collapsed and had gone into cardiac arrest in the middle of the urgent care waiting room. So as I guess he had picked her up, tried to put her back in the wheelchair. Another nurse came out and just swooped her up and carried her to the back. And when I got there, she was already on a breathing treatment. I don't think she was quite vented, but they had to do like a trach or a vent. I'm sorry, they did ventilate her. And then they were getting ready to take her to a CAT scan. So they had to knock her out again. And they had her on ketamine, fentanyl, morphine, Dilaudid, Narcan, because they overdid the morphine. So they had to give her some Narcan. And this was all within an hour span on her body. And she was a very healthy child, by the way. Like, she hadn't been in and out of doctors. We rarely get sick. So that's another reason why I didn't think she quite needed a vaccine. So after her CAT scan, she had woken up, so they gave her another dose. And then she was airlifted to the Children's Hospital in Detroit, which is about 20 minutes away driving. It's about 10 helicopter. So by the time we got there, took about another hour because they had to prepare her for the ECMO machine because she had undergone 2 more cardiac arrests in flight within 10 minutes. Her heart stopped beating for a total of 2 minutes. So she was hooked up to ECMO. She was treated with remdesivir for 5 days, which they didn't tell me at the time. And then on August 6th, I called my ex every day because I had to come home and stay with my other children. They were very, traumatized as well. So we agreed he would stay up there during the night, and I'd come up there every day. And anytime we would talk about her to each other, say, how's our girl doing? How's her, has she opened her eyes this morning? Because she would open her eyes and look around, but, she was under medical induced coma the whole time. She could respond to commands. But I had said, how is she today? And he said, not good. We're going to have to turn the machines off today. And I had said, what? And he said, due to ECMO, because it started to shut down the night before, they had to switch out the ECMO for a new one because they started to clot. It's also, I left this part out, but this part is also very important. From the moment she got in, her limbs turned black. And it grew all the way up slowly. And they couldn't amputate because she was on blood thinners due to ECMO. So she would have bled out. So her limbs were, black. She suffered in there. So they said there was another medication they could try, but it would take at least 2 more days to see if it would work. And as a mother, I knew she was tired. I knew she couldn't fight anymore because she would cry in her sleep. And so I said, I don't want to keep her going through this because she's done. She's tired. She can't fight anymore. So we made the decision to shut the machines off with our family. Her sisters and brothers were there. And then about 20 minutes after, I was braiding her hair because it was super long. And the nurse came up to me and told me we shouldn't do an autopsy because they knew that she had died from COVID-19, knowing that she was fully vaccinated. So on her death certificate, she died from COVID-19 and multi-organ failure. And then I had gotten her medical reports back, and they diagnosed her with myocarditis, which they didn't tell me at all about that. They just said that her heart and her lungs needed to rest so she could fight off all these other infections. And then when we showed up to urgent care, the nurses put in triage that she showed up in acute distress and a very low heart rate, but their numbers were different. So we're trying to pursue a case and trying to get her medical records. Right now, we're having a hard time because we need digital copies. So we are planning on fighting for her rights, her voice. The vax injured. I've become close friends with a lot of them. Their stories are heartbreaking. I know a couple of fathers, a few more families. Dan Hartman, Krista Alan Martin. They lost their daughter. She was 17. Dan lost his son. He was 17. Ernesto, again, another 17-year-old, and they were all Pfizer's. So
Yeah.
Together, we hope to spread awareness. I mean, it's such a weird, spot to be in with the vaccines because you can't force people not to take them, but they also shouldn't force people to take them.
Sure. Thank you so much for sharing, Shanna. I wanted to just ask a question on, you mentioned the word, I think ECMO. Mm-hmm. Can you explain that for listeners who don't know what that is?
So there's a few different machines of ECMO. Aubrynn's was specifically, so basically it's like a lung and a heart. Hers worked on gravity, so she would have to be like 5 mattresses up. So we'd have to like climb like a step ladder to be face level with her. And it was a tube that would run out and it would run into this machine with her blood, where it would put oxygen into her blood, and then it would shoot it back up and in. So her blood it's almost like a dialysis, but for.
Yes, I see. There is a treatment that some friends that I know of, especially vaccine injured friends, are doing. Also long COVID friends with HELP apheresis in Germany. And that's a similar process to a dialysis where they're filtering out your blood and then putting it back in. But I know it's quite tough on your body. So a lot of people say they feel really terrible afterwards. But people are just so desperate to try anything to try and clear the clots, and it seems like COVID, as far as I understand it, in my case as well, there's microclots now, and there's some kind of clotting issue with the spike protein from the virus and the vaccines. And also, I unfortunately did also take 2 Pfizers of my own choice. I was very pro-vaccine. I thought it was the right thing to do, and we had all those messages, as you know, on media and the radio saying you're going to protect your community, you'll protect your elderly. I had a grandpa.
That's why she was doing it
on his deathbed, and I thought, no, I need to protect him and my family from passing it on easily and from getting it myself. And it's really sad to see the fallout and the devastation that COVID and the pandemic and vaccines and everything has left. I wanted to ask, so in terms of the autopsy, you didn't do that with her based on the hospital's kind of hesitancy.
Yeah, well, based on at the time, again, like it wasn't until maybe a year after when I realized that there was a community of parents who have lost their children, the vax injured. So at the time, I had just lost my daughter. I was still in a state of shock. And I think that's why they approached me when they did. Because from what I understand, if a 17-year-old or someone under 18 perfectly healthy passes away, they're supposed to do autopsies on them, at least within like Michigan state laws, from what a nurse friend of mine was telling me. But it's almost like they infiltrated me because they knew she was fully vaccinated, and every medical report, it is in big red print, like fully vaccinated.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I'm not sure. I know before we had to turn the machines on, some local news channels wanted to interview us, but then a lawyer we were talking to told us not to, because not to make it political
Mm.
and not to discuss, the vaccine. Even in the GoFundMe, we were told not to write vaccine because it was so early on. No one was really reporting it at the time.
Mm.
And like I said, it wasn't until later that I realized. So, um,
Mm.
sorry, I
Sure.
forgot. I lost track of what I
That,
was.
that's okay.
Okay.
Yeah, I imagine in terms of, so your daughter's Aubryn's, is that how I say it?
Aubrynn.
Aubrynn, sorry, cool.
That's
Really sorry for your loss, again, Shanna, and thank you for sharing. I wanted to ask, in terms of what I see as, like, I guess the lack of support for friends that have vaccine injuries from AstraZeneca, some other brands. I think in the UK, especially, a friend, Alex Mitchell, Adam Rowland, and also John Watt, they all have, I think, AstraZeneca's. I think John's is Pfizer, but have you had any correspondence with Pfizer, or any way to contact or speak with someone to ask? Yeah.
Um, no, not quite yet. I actually wouldn't know where to start with who I would contact. 'Cause I know there's different, so like in Canada and some areas, their batches came from like Germany. Like depending, because
Mm.
another question I had was why a lot of people's vaccine cards have different batch numbers. Well, Auburn's had the same
Mm.
batch number. It was almost like she was given the same batch. I don't know
Mm.
if maybe it was bad, it sat in the back, too long. I mean, I don't think they put enough effort into figuring out why people are becoming sick or injured or death due to these vaccines, because, for some people they may be safe and effective, but for others they are a poison. So I wouldn't even know where to start with them, but I do tag them in every post I make about her on Twitter. I make sure
Mm.
that I share it to them. I share it to the vaccine communities. I try. I mean, I I tried to get into VAERS. I still haven't got a response from them, and I filed a report maybe a year ago in February.
Mm. Sorry,
So
what is theirs?
so if there's a death or an injury or you're sick, they tell you to, if you were vaccinated, to report your vaccine injury to VAERS. It's
Mm.
VAR or VAERS, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
you're supposed to put down, your symptoms, the vaccine you had, the batch number if you have it, and then they'll run a report on it. And they'll check, it's
Mm.
almost like a how bad's my batch.
Mm.
And then, I mean, there's a lot on there if you read through some of the victims, and the survivors too on there. It's heartbreaking. It's a really big database, and they just keep saying, we haven't gotten to some reports yet. But like I said, it's been like a year.
Yeah. Yeah. When Auburn was booked into the hospital, did they run any kind of PCR test or something to check
Every
what
day,
was going on? Yeah.
every day
And
was a PCR test.
what did those things show?
Her
Those
PCR
results?
showed she had COVID-19.
Mm.
And so that's why they were treating her with the remdesivir,
Mm-hmm.
which also, and the vancomycin, which is a antibiotic. There's like, I think it's eight medications they give as a protocol to COVID patients that have COVID-19. There's eight of them, and Auburn was given five, and it destroys your kidneys. So the only thing she tested positive for was COVID-19, which is
Mm.
weird because we drove in my car with our windows up in July with her breathing the same air. She didn't wear a mask. She shared my daughter's pillow. We aren't
Mm.
vaccinated. She was the only one. We didn't catch COVID from her.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I'm not, and she didn't really quite have symptoms of COVID. It was
Yeah.
like she was
Yeah.
tested on the 18th at like 11 at night and already, on ECMO by a day later.
Mm. Mm.
And she didn't
I
run a
just,
fever.
yeah. I suppose that's the question that someone would ask, I guess, and like, what would you say to someone who said, like, how do you know it's a vaccine death? How do you know it's, I mean, it's a hard question to ask, but how do you know it's not just COVID? You know, that kind of thought. Yeah.
I feel like knowing my daughter's health, even when we had to go get her previous medical records prior, she had very little. I mean, like strep throat, maybe earaches when she was little. She was very healthy. She wasn't an athlete. She wasn't out there running around. She was actually pretty lazy. You know, she was a 17-year-old girl. So she was very healthy. And up until that vaccine, I think it destroyed her immune system in some way. I'm not saying that she didn't have COVID or COVID didn't play a role in it, but she should have been knowing her own immune system already, and then knowing that the vaccine is supposed to help boost it. You know, we all know it doesn't cure you from getting it, but it's supposed to help with mild symptoms, and it didn't even do that. In fact, it did complete opposite. I don't know if it was an overabundance, like you said, of the spike proteins or something, but it almost like attacked her own body. Like the COVID did opposite. So, and a lot of doctors, I don't think there's enough study on, you know, patients, victims, people who are suffering from them. I don't think they're doing enough to quite figure out what is going on, and that's a problem.
Yeah. I also get the sense there's like this almost this silent kind of thought process of, oh, the pandemic's over, we survived, let's move on. And it's incredibly sad for myself, for many of the long COVID community, the vaccine injury community. Even I've started developing friendships with others online who struggle with chronic fatigue syndrome, and there's all these illnesses that just kind of get like sidelined, and like with your daughter as well. It's incredibly sad that they just say, oh, sorry, that was one of the risks of the vaccine, or just one of the unfortunate deaths in COVID, and then we move on with life. And you know,
That's it too. It's not like they warned people about these side effects either. You know, it was safe and effective, totally safe and effective for everybody to take. That was their slogan, you know. And for me, I've never seen vax injured. I know that there are some, but I had never, you know, I'm pro-choice. So if you want to choose to get a vaccine, that's your business. You don't force people. But the sad thing is for the vax injured community is they're gaslit so bad. And, you know, when I go into these, you know, Twitter spaces and I listen to the vax injured, you know, and they're all trying to find remedies and help and just anything to just survive. It's absolutely heartbreaking to hear, because it's almost like quality or quantity of life. Like so many of them have, you know, it's horrible.
I wanted to touch on that point you mentioned about the immune system and that being compromised by vaccines. It's obviously, I think it's important for me on the podcast to try and have a objective perspective on everything. So what I'm trying to do is understand the difference between what the vaccine has done to your immune system and what the virus itself is doing. In my personal case, I know the vaccine did something because my energy levels were quite severely reduced after my second Pfizer, but 4 months later after my infection, my actual acute infection, then it just knocked me completely, and then I felt way worse. And so I am what I call a hybrid case of a vaccine adverse event or injury with long COVID. And some people even disregard long COVID as a condition completely because they're so anti-vax. And I think that's also a tension I'm dealing with in this whole space of long COVID to vaccine injuries and deaths is how do you figure out the truth for your own case? Because every case is unique. I can't say my case is exactly the same as someone else's and that treatments I'm trying are going to work for that person as well. But the point I'm making, sorry, is that recently I've been looking into the gut microbiome and that side of things. And I've just done a stool sample test, which they give you a microbiome report, and that I'll be sharing hopefully in the next couple of months as well. But looking at that, the doctors that I've been seeing that actually wish to remain anonymous for now, they are seeing a complete wipeout of bifidobacteria in the gut microbiomes of people who've had vaccines. I can't say if it's also with the virus, but in my case, I have zero bifidobacteria Akkermansia is gone, and there's a lactobacillica or something else that's completely gone. There's nothing, zero. And that's a massive part of my immune system. And, they say the gut is like a big part of your immune system. So I'm hoping that in treating my gut health, I'm able to help clear out some of the residual spike or the damage in my body that's happened. And I don't know what the answer is yet, but I related to that point of like, if the vaccine did compromise your daughter's immune system, that's incredibly sad because maybe she had a much better fighting chance of just hitting the virus head on, as she was. Yeah.
About, I think it was 3 months later, we had all finally got COVID. Me, my kids, my dad,
Yeah.
he had stage 4 cancer at that time. He was unvaccinated.
Mm.
It sucked. I'm not going to say that we, were running around here feeling fine, but it was no worse than having the flu for us, and even for my 5-year-old who probably felt crummy for the first 2 days and was like fine right after that. And then my middle daughter, she went to her dad, so she didn't catch it, but we survived, and I've had it twice since. And that long COVID, I almost feel like was more normalized, more so after vax injuries came out. Like I didn't really hear about that till after I started in with the vax injured groups. But even then, they weren't talking about it. You know what I mean? It was more like I'm seeing like news reports on long COVID, this kind of things. But I also hear about VADES, which is
Okay.
also a vaccine injury, where that does pretty much wipe. It's like almost like AIDS, where it wipes out your immune system. It will just make you autoimmune. And there's a few women that I talk to who do suffer from that. And like, they've lost all their hair, their heart rate. The list goes on who knows? No one quite even knows what this stuff and these vaccines do. So how your own body reacts to it. It's just a huge list of symptoms.
Yeah. I struggle with obviously like I said, my mindset prior to the pandemic was pro-vaccine. Big pharma cares about you. They make good, safe products. Maybe there's you have a bad side effect once in a while, and that's a headache or nausea or something that's treatable.
Or feeling crummy. Yeah.
I never expected there to be a death as a side effect. And in terms of medical ethics, I think that's something I've been trying to understand better is in a medical setting, if you give 1 million vaccines and one person dies out of that million, is that okay? Like I'm sure as a mother, you say, no, of course that's not okay because that's your daughter. And I would say the same. For one of my family members, that's not okay. That's not an okay risk of a 1 million vaccines for one death. And I think
I hear that a lot.
I was very trusting of big pharma and the government, and I like to think that I believe people have your interests at heart, that they want the best for people and them to have good health. But just the fact that these companies are so hesitant to release the reports and the data and their trials and all that stuff. Pfizer was trying to withhold a document for 75 years, and I saw a report on that recently, and it's sad because, people, I think, especially like Alex Mitchell, there's nothing he can do to change his amputation to his leg that he's now lost due to a AstraZeneca vaccine. But just someone from the company coming to his front door and say, hey, we're so sorry this happened. We want to help you financially and just support you where we can, and also try and study you to help this not happen to anyone else. The same as my friend Adam, he's also said the same. No one's ever contacted him to say, hey, we're so sorry this happened. We'd like to study your case so that we can prevent this in the future. AstraZeneca, they've just pulled their vaccine from the market. And it's like this quiet hush hush, like, sorry, like we have 1,000 people who've now got blood clots and heart conditions for the rest of their life, but we're going to just, carry on with life, and that's it. Yeah. It's definitely a difficult post-COVID world. And I wanted to ask.
So they pull it from the shelf and they don't even try to compensate their. Wow.
I think in Alex's case, he's based in Scotland, and he mentioned that they do have a vaccine compensation group, But as far as I know, not a lot of people get awarded that claim unless it's a severe thing. And I myself have found that the tension of it's not a visible illness that I have, that people can't see my blood clots, they can't see the vascular damage, they can't see my immune system damage and all of that. So I'm not treated with a lot of empathy, I'd say. And I'm sure other people who have vaccine injuries have the same, because it's not a visible thing. They might be like, oh, what's wrong with you? You know, just sleep it off kind of thing. And sorry, the point is I wanted to actually get
It's
back
true.
sorry,
They do that.
yeah, I wanted to get back to your daughter's when you said that the limbs were going black. Is that what happens when your body starts to clot, or is there low oxygen transfer to those tissues that they start what is
I hear two different things.
Yeah.
I've heard that it's the oxygen, but excuse me. I've seen I've known I'm sorry, I've known of people, one or two, that have had and have passed out, no oxygen. They've been under, without oxygen for like 5-10 minutes, and their arms and their limbs hadn't, turned black. So I'm not sure if it's just certain cases maybe, or if it was the clots. But after learning about the clotting, I would almost say I was probably due to clotting.
I have realized that unfortunately, if I've found, I can send you some reports I've done in Stellenbosch at a university here, and a company called Biocode. They test for these microclots, and based on that, unfortunately, if you are prone to developing clotting from the spike protein of the virus, you will probably most likely develop that from the spike protein of the vaccine as well. And they've seen clots from both cases, like before the vaccines existed, but also post, and the common denominator is the spike protein, unfortunately.
So do they see it a lot within people who are vaccinated and hadn't caught COVID? Because I do hear people who are vaccinated, they do catch COVID, and then it goes haywire within their body. But I don't really see, very many charts on fully vaccinated, or, that may have had those, because, obviously they're not going to report them.
Yeah, I believe there can be clotting from just vaccine and not having caught COVID. That was actually put in our little leaflet. They said I actually have it somewhere in a file here. I only whipped it out like 2 years after the fact, and I thought, oh, I got this on the day, and it said 5% of people will develop microclots or clotting from the vaccine as a side effect. And I don't know why that is. I don't know if it's a genetic predisposition, your immune system, your health at the time. But I can't also speak on Biocode's behalf, all the research and data that they are seeing. I would love access to that. But at the moment, if I've requested, for example, all the IgG antibody tests of spike protein antibodies from patients of a certain doctor, they legally can't give that to me. Even though they can give me my results, I just can't see everyone else's to compare it to, because I'd love to see all the data and be able to make a graph and things, but unfortunately I don't have access to all of that. But hopefully in time we can get more, I think, clarity on that data, because I think that would be super nice to see, and it'll help those that are struggling with vaccine injuries, long COVID, and even yourself, just for a bit of peace of mind or just maybe knowing what happened. I think, and that's the sad thing is there's no this is what happened, and this is what we didn't know at the time, and those kind of things.
I feel that it's still, even if I can't get justice for her, which I do hope, she wanted to be an activist for human rights. That was a really big thing for her. She, just like you, she felt like she was doing the right thing for everyone around her. But I would really love to just keep spreading awareness, for parents and everybody, that, like you said, you didn't pull out that pamphlet till after. But when you think of 5% are going to get, it's like when I had my children, I had an epidural. It's like 20% of women can be paralyzed due to this. I mean, I signed right away. You know, I signed on that paper, and I'm
Mm,
thinking, how many is really 20% of the women having babies like are paralyzed?
mm,
It's very important to know that you could be that 1%. You know,
yeah,
I mean, because to me, the adverse reactions are way bigger than the 1%.
yeah.
All the
Shauna,
symptoms.
yeah, I agree, Shauna. I wanted to ask in terms of the documentation or the legal and the fine print and all those things that maybe we sign, you know, the long 5-page thing and we don't realize everything in it, as a lot of us do. Have you been able to get that from the pharmacy or clinic that she went to get the vaccines and sign herself?
I have not yet.
Hmm.
I don't know if they would give it to me because I had called up there to question why she would have two of the same batches. And they couldn't answer the question for me. So I'm not sure if I could get, and I don't, to be honest, I don't think she came home with one. When Aubryn came home, she didn't have a pamphlet. So I'm not sure if CVS was giving them out. And again, she was like 17. She couldn't remember her own homework at the time. So she probably just
Yeah,
threw it away and, you know, just didn't think to look at it. But then again,
yeah.
you know, they were offering people movie tickets, concert tickets, hamburgers to go get the vaccine. So it was like they were
Mm,
almost giving people prizes to do it too. So I don't think a
mm.
lot of people read those pamphlets.
Yeah. I know from my case, it was a lot of iPads. Discovery, actually, I'd say I'd compliment them. They ran a really good professional event or a conference in a conference center here. They had all the stations waiting for your vaccines and everything. And it was all digital. So just an iPad PDF, you sign the signatures, they give you the little leaflets, but most of that fine print is still what I want to get hold of from Discovery, because they managed on Pfizer's behalf, I imagine, all of those first injections. The second one I had at a random hospital somewhere in the southern suburbs here in Cape Town. But yeah, were there any other thoughts you'd like to share, or um, anything else? Yeah.
I appreciate you sharing Auburn's story. I think the more podcasts and videos that are shared and what you guys do is amazing because it's very hard to find truths out there.
Mm,
Like I said, I'm not like a conspiracy theorist or anything like that, but they do shove it under the rug, and I think it needs to be brought out to spread awareness, to
mm,
draw attention to everyone that's injured, first and foremost, help them get the help, the testing they need. And I
mm,
just think people just need to keep spreading awareness. And if you or you know someone who was sick, have them speak up because I feel like you're louder in numbers, you know,
mm, mm,
and just fight for everybody because you're not alone. I mean, there's so many. Like,
mm,
it's heartbreaking the amount of people I know who are sick from vaccines. Now,
mm,
it's
mm,
really opened my eyes more so to other vaccines. You know, the HPV one gives. There's huge side effects for that one. There's huge ones with the shingles. You know, it's not just COVID. There's a lot of injuries due to other vaccines as well that have. It's opened my eyes to that as well.
yeah,
So I think, you know, don't just trust everything they say.
yeah. I like you, I was very unaware of vaccine injuries, and I thought, oh, like if you're against, like if you're anti-vax, you're a conspiracy theorist, you're just like anti-government, anti
Mhm.
like institutions and things. And I actually had arguments with my girlfriend, and I said, no, like, why don't you want to get the vaccine? Like, we're going to protect our elderly in the community and hopefully reduce our chances of a severe infection. And it didn't stop me getting COVID. It didn't stop me developing long COVID, and I possibly have a injury or probably have an injury on top of it.
I hear
So,
a lot of
yeah,
injured say that they were diagnosed with long COVID. That's
yeah,
common.
yeah.
So I do believe that is. I think that's what they call
Mm,
that adverse reaction. I think because my dad early on when Aubryn was actually in the hospital, he was diagnosed with long COVID and he wasn't vaccinated and he probably had COVID
mm,
for like maybe a month
mm.
and it
Sure.
was gone. But I
Yeah,
don't think he tested positive for a month, but he felt crummy, weak, tired. But
yeah, yeah.
and that was the
No,
first time I had ever heard of it.
it's devastating. Yeah, unfortunately, there's also not just vaccine and long COVID together, and COVID. There's also long COVID without vaccine. I've met multiple friends who are suffering years post-infection without touching vaccines, also for a lot of female friends actually who were hesitant regarding their reproductive health and what they would do, you know, to their reproductive system, which I'm totally actually now glad that my partner didn't get the vaccine actually.
Oh, she didn't.
No, she didn't. She's
Okay.
very anti of the risks of the mRNA, and that's what's interesting. I wouldn't say I'm against all vaccines. I'm just
Right.
more aware of it now, and the mRNA technology I think needs a lot more testing and a lot more just clarity on say, hey, you have a 10% chance of getting, you know, massive clotting issues and you're going to be bedridden for life. You know, people I don't think knew that at the time, and it was just do the right thing, protect your grandma kind of
Right.
narrative.
There wasn't enough time or study. It was developed in 9 months. The flu vaccine took what, like 19 or like 10 years to perfect.
Yeah.
It was just so soon. I think they tried to do good, then it just failed.
Yeah.
And the new technology, I
Yeah.
just don't think is right to, I don't trust the mRNA. Vaccines do work for a lot of people. But also sometimes I think doctors aren't listening to patients, or, you know, my daughter, my middle daughter they thought she had an autoimmune disorder years ago, and they were going to vaccinate her until my chiropractor said, don't wait till they test her before you allow them to vaccinate her, because it could end up making her 10 times sicker. She was fine, but I mean, even then they were just going to vaccinate her without really knowing if she was autoimmune. And, you know, I think they need to do way more testing to make sure people are also able to get vaccines, because I think some bodies just don't react well.
I wanted to ask on that note, I just thought of it now, in terms of, say, the other side of those that took the vaccine and are glad they took it. I don't know if you have friends and family that did and survived and are fine. Do you understand, or have you found out the numbers on what the chances of your daughter passing away was? Like, is it 1 in a million, 1 in 1,000?
No, I honestly, we can't find a statistic, at least, you know, on Google or on the computer. I don't know where else, maybe VAERS, but VAERS is so behind with all their numbers. But I haven't found one article or study on fully vaccinated teenagers or young adults that are fully vaccinated and then, you know, die after like 2 days. There really isn't one. I don't know. I tried to ask some of the pro-vaxxers groups on, like, you know, Twitter and all that, and they can never give me one. I haven't really been able to find it. I don't know if they're rolled into like just COVID deaths. I think they are. I think there are COVID deaths, so I don't think they mark those numbers.
Sure. Wow. Yeah, but Shanna, thank you so much for your time this evening. I know it's the afternoon for you, but I really appreciate your openness and honesty. I know it's an incredibly hard conversation and a difficult memory to share, but I really admire your openness and your desire to help others and just to raise awareness for what's happened to your daughter. And if you guys want to connect with Shanna, please find her on X. I enjoy that Elon is pro free speech, which I fully believe in. You know, even if someone's opinion differs to mine, I think we should all have a voice to share what's happened to us in our story, and not let other people's just censor you or put you down because it doesn't fit their experience or their narrative. You know, So
Thank you.
Thanks, Shanna. Thanks for your time this evening. I really appreciate it. And
thank you. I appreciate you. I appreciate you for sharing her story and doing what you do. It's brave of a lot of people to go out there and start, you know, doing that. So thank you.